Hey guys, it's time for another teamwork build. And yes, I finally fixed my lighting issue. So now you guys get to see my ugly mug at the beginning of each of these videos now. But let's get into the builds. For today's build, never thought I'd do this, but we're going to be building a fighter that uses a two-handed weapon today. I know that when I usually do a fighter for these videos, it's hand-free, I'm going to grab you, which is a great way to play a fighter. However, we can do some pretty good teamwork stuff with a two-handed weapon as well. We'll talk about what this build is designed to do when we get to the first teamwork reports. In the meantime though, our ancestry for this build is going to be the brand new Gorin heritage. And we're going to be going with the Thorned Rose heritage. This heritage, we gain the Wicked Thorns reaction. Once per day, when we're hit with an unarmed strike or a strike with a non-reach melee weapon, we can use this reaction. The attacker must make a basic reflex save against our class DC or take 1d8 piercing damage. On a critical failure, the target also takes 1d4 persistent bleed damage. At 3rd level and every 2 levels afterward, the piercing damage increases by 1d8 and the persistent bleed damage increases by 1. We can only use this once per day for now, but that'll change in a few levels. Starting stats for this build should be Strength 18, Dexterity 12, Constitution 14, Intelligence 10, Wisdom 10, and Charisma 14. Alright, time to talk about feats. First up, for our first class feat at level 1, we'll go with Sudden Charge. This build is about damage, so we need to get in there and start doing it. So with this, we can move twice and attack for 2 actions. And then attack again on our 3rd action. Then of course we've got our Ancestry feat, and we're going to go with Ancient Memories. Once per day during your daily preparations, you can become trained in one skill of your choice. This lasts until you prepare again. But since this is temporary, we can't use it for a permanent character option such as a feat. At level 2, it's time for Intimidating Strike. For 2 actions, we can make a melee strike, and if we hit and deal damage, the target is frightened 1. If we critically hit, which, come on, we're a fighter, then the foe is frightened 2. Then for this build's first dedication, we're going to pick up the Champion Dedication. This will give us religion and another skill, depending on our deity. We also become bound by our deity's anathema and our champion's code, which we want to pick up the Paladin cause here. We'll talk about why later in this video. For our general feats, I'm just going to go over all of them now. They are Die Hard, Toughness, Canny Acumen for our will saves, Incredible Initiative, and Fleet. You can take these in any order you want, but these are the ones you need to take for this build. At level 4, we can finally take one of those teamwork feats for two-handed weapons I mentioned, Knockdown. For 2 actions, we can make a melee strike. If this melee strike hits and deals damage, we can attempt an athletics check to trip the target as part of this action. Since we're wielding a two-handed weapon, we can ignore the requirement that we have a hand free. Both attacks count toward multiple attack penalty, but don't increase it until after you've made both attacks. Then on the free archetype side, we'll take Healing Touch. When enemies figure out what we're doing, they're going to want to take us out quick. That's why we need a healing option for this build. And this will give us Lay on Hands. But also, a cleric alongside this build really wouldn't hurt. Actually, in this build, every time we get ability score increases, we will want to increase our strength, constitution, wisdom, and charisma. We are going to be wearing heavy armor in this build, so dex doesn't matter at all. And we don't need intelligence in the slightest in this build. But the rest, yeah, we'll definitely need all the rest. And of course, now we gotta talk about the 5th level Ancestry feats. And that's gonna be Murderous Thorns. Since we've got the Thorned Rose heritage, we can use Wicked Thorns once per hour now instead of once per day. We don't have the Hidden Thorn feats, so the rest of this feat doesn't matter. With Shadow Defenses, if a frightened enemy is within your melee reach, you can make a strike against that creature for 1 action. If you hit and deal damage, the target is flat-footed until its frightened condition ends. If the target was already flat-footed when you hit it with this strike, it can't reduce its frightened value below 1 until the start of your next turn. And then for this build, we're going to need Retributive Strike from our Paladin cause, so we need to take Champion's Reaction. So if an enemy targets one of our allies and hits them, we can reduce the damage and then hit them, assuming we're within reach. Then it's time for Impassable Wall Stance. When we're in this stance, if an enemy tries to move and we critically hit them with our attack of opportunity, then we can disrupt that move action. It's time for Ranged Reprisal. We can now use Retributive Strike with a ranged weapon. In addition, if the foe is within 5 feet of our reach but not in our reach, we can take a step as part of this reaction before making a melee Retributive Strike. Alright, at level 9 we get another Ancestry feat, and we're going to pick up Perfume Cloud. For 2 actions, you can issue a cloud of fragrance from your body. Plants and fungi are immune to this effect, but every other creature in a 10-foot emanation centered on you must make a Fortitude save against, for us, Class DC. On a critical success, no effect. On a successful saving throw, the target is dazzled for 1 round. On a failed saving throw, the target is dazzled and can only see 10 feet away for 1 round. On a critical failure, the target is blinded for 1 round. Then at level 10, we're going to start with Improved Knockdown. Now, instead of making a strike followed by a trip, we make a single strike. If we do this and we hit, then we automatically apply the critical success effect of trip. And since we're using a 2-handed weapon, we get to use that damage die size instead of a d6 for the damage from the critical trip. And then we'll take Divine Ally for Blade Ally. We need to be able to hit ghosts, and this will guarantee that, as Blade Ally allows us to add the Ghost Touch property rune to our weapon. For today's teamwork reports, I will answer one question I think you guys might be asking. What is this build about? Put simply, this build is designed to punish anyone within reach of us for doing, well, anything. We're not quite there at this level, but here's what we can punish the enemy for doing at this level. Enemy moves away from you, that's an attack of opportunity. And we might even disrupt the action. Enemy want to step around you, that's wasting actions. Does an enemy want to cast a spell near you? That's an attack of opportunity. Does an enemy want to attack an ally? That's Retributive Strike. Ranged enemy want to attack an ally? We can use Retributive Strike with a ranged weapon. Enemy want to attack you? Wicked Thorns. Oh, side note, we will want to use a 2-handed weapon with reach here. That way we can hit enemies from further away. We can also use Knockdown and Improved Knockdown to get them on the ground, making them flat-footed to everyone. And we're going to have high charisma because of one of the focus spells we're going to be picking up on the free archetype side. So we can also frighten them while they're on the ground, making them even easier to hit. And of course, we can hit ghosts with all of this thanks to Divine Ally. Okay, moving on to level 12, we've got Combat Reflexes. At the start of each of our turns, we gain an additional reaction that we can only use to make an attack of opportunity. Then we'll pick up the Mauler Dedication. We're not really going to gain much from this. I mean, we already get critical specialization effects from 2-handed weapons, and we're already trained in them. But we need this to take some other feats that are really going to help this build. For our Ancestry feat, at level 13, we'll take Look But Don't Touch. Once per day, for 2 actions, we can make it so that for the next minute, any creature that attacks us with an unarmed strike or a non-reach weapon takes 3d6 poison damage. This will go great with our Wicked Thorns reaction. At level 14, it's time for Stance Savant. Now we can go straight into our Impassable Wall Stance right when we roll initiative as a free action. Meaning, we don't have to spend an action on it. Meaning, if there's an enemy within 10 feet of us and they try to move past us, and we crit on our attack of opportunity, they're not going anywhere. Then it's time for Shoving Sweep. As a reaction, if a foe leaves a square during a move action is using that's within our reach, we can shove them. We do have to be wielding a 2-handed weapon to use this feat. However, This feat is for when we don't crit with our attack of opportunity. I'll talk more on that in the teamwork report at the end of this video. At 16th, it's time for Cut from the Air. As a reaction, if we are the target of a physical ranged attack, and we are aware of it and not flat-footed, we can gain a +4 bonus to AC against the triggering attack. If the attack misses, we cut it out of the air. You want to use arrows against us? Try again. Then on the free archetype side, we'll take Hammer Quake. For 3 actions, you can choose a square within your reach, including your own space. If there's a foe in that space, make a strike with a non-finesse weapon you're wielding in 2 hands. Then attempt to trip every foe in that space, and every space adjacent to that space, ignoring trip's requirement that you have a hand free. This counts as 3 attacks for your multiple attack penalty, but don't increase your multiple attack penalty until you've made the strike, if any, and all the trip attempts. This is for when smart enemies gang up on you. Now you can trip them all instead of just one of them. For our last ancestry feat at level 17, it's time for Gorin's Wrath. We can cast Nature's Reprisal as an innate primal spell once per hour. With this spell, you can target all squares in an 80-foot burst area that contain plants. The range of this spell is 120 feet. To your enemies, these squares become difficult terrain. If it was already difficult terrain due to plants, then it becomes greater difficult terrain and hazardous terrain. This deals 6 points of poison damage every time an enemy enters an affected square. We're pretty much always going to be able to use this feat when we're outdoors, but not indoors, sadly. At level 18, it's time for Smash from the Air. We can now use Cut from the Air on spells that require ranged spell attack rolls, meaning we can knock down even some spells, which is pretty nuts. Then it's time for Unbalancing Sweep. For 3 actions, we can choose up to 3 adjacent foes. We can choose whether to shove or trip them. We do have to make separate athletics rolls for each one of them, and we have to use the same action against all 3 of them. Each attempt counts towards map, but we don't increase our map until after we've made all the attempts. Enemies might be pushing us back and getting a little too close to our allies. So with this, we can shove 3 of them back. We won't be using this feat to trip opponents because we already have Hammer Quake for that. Alright, we're finally here at level 20, and the first feat we're going to take is Boundless Reprisals. We have a ton of reactions in this build, but now we have a reaction that we can use for anything, and we have a reaction that we can only use for attack of opportunity, but this feat will let us gain a reaction at the start of each of our enemy's turns that we can use for any fighter class feature or feat, as attack of opportunity or Cut from the Air. And our last feat for this build is going to be Radiant Blade Spirits. Now we can add the axiomatic, flaming, or holy runes to our weapon at the start of each day. At this point, we probably already have a Ghost Touch rune on our weapon, so why not get even more damage against certain targets, since we're going to be attacking a ton in this build. Alright, time for the second teamwork report of this video. Unfortunately, even with all these feats, we're not going to be able to counter everything. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do anything about spells that don't require a spell attack roll. And we're not really going to be able to do anything if enemies use spells that don't have the attack trait against our allies. But what we can do now is deal even more damage against foes that try to attack us. However, keep in mind, we can only use Look But Don't Touch once per day, and we can only use Wicked Thorns once per hour. But still, if enemies are attacking us instead of our friends, that's all the better. Which smart enemies will want to do, since we're reducing the damage of one of them on one of our allies every single turn. And we can knock down ranged attacks coming at us. We just have to be either wielding our two-handed weapon or have a hand free. And since to deal with ranged attackers we're going to be using something like a longbow, we'll have a hand free then. So we'll be able to use Cut from the Air when enemies decide to use ranged attack against us. meaning enemies will want to use ranged attacks against our allies. But remember, we have ranged reprisal. That means we can use ranged attacks for retributive strike. Remember, we're about punishing the foe for doing as much as we can. In regard to nature's reprisal, remember, you can't step in difficult terrain. That means enemies can no longer step around us. So, they have to either attack us or take an attack of opportunity. That might cause them to just straight up not be able to move at all. And if we happen to find an area of naturally difficult terrain caused by plants, all the better. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more Pathfinder 2e teamwork builds and other content. You can also check out the Patreon page for even more teamwork builds, as well as Google Sheets for this and a bunch of other builds. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, teamwork is vital.